Your question, Luis, is I hear that many people say design thinking and therefore also service design is something that has many flaws, and system thinking is a more suited approach. Is it the case? If yes, how should we apply it? So there is a big bias I have to reveal before I answer this question, which is I'm not a system thinking practitioner. So take everything I say with a big grain of salt. When the iPad, when TV came out, people said, this is the end of radio, and years later, what we see is radio is still something happening. What has changed is that radio, it has become more precise and more niche and more specific. When then the iPad came out, people said, books are dead. And if we look at the background of Daniela, we see that there are many books. And still, she might own an iPad. This show is that whenever a new way of thinking comes, it doesn't replace completely the one from before. It just helps the one from before to be less general and more specific. And I think it's the same with design thinking versus system thinking. You can recognize, oh, here I'm in a problem that is very social, that is interacting with many different people, cultures, also complete ecosystems. Then system thinking is a much better tool than service design. But if you are working in a cafe and you want to improve the waiting time, then definitely service design is a very good tool. And system thinking might get you thinking about stuff that is very interesting, but not very useful at that moment. Same thing is if you use service design to solve these kind of very complex problems, these weird problems, then you might end up with solutions that are very practical, but that solve only a tiny bit. And that might be even dangerous because then they have kind of domino effects in the end, which might be dangerous.
I have been reading a book from Sherry Kababa. It's basically a book about mixing design thinking with system thinking. It's interesting, but I think you have made a good point, because we do not always have to take care of so big problems like, for example, homelessness. These are very complex problems that perhaps system thinking have a more suitable approach. I think for other problems like the cafe, I think service design, as we know today, have more helpful tools and more helpful approach too.
The question is not so much, should I use system thinking and not use any more service design, or should I use service design and not system thinking, but rather for simple problems, use service design. For complex issues, use system thinking. And in the middle, you can always mix them together. Sometimes you want to make something sugary, then use sugar. Sometimes you want to make something salty, then use salt. And sometimes you want to make the best bolognese like my nonna does, and you have to cut some sugar in the bolognese sauce to go with the salt, because that's what makes her bolognese sauce so good.